What up, contenders? Welcome to episode 57 of an ongoing series where we basically take the camera anywhere we want and we try to find secrets and new discoveries to some of our favorite games. This week is all about Ginyo Takeda, a man who's been at Nintendo for a very long time and he retired this month. He created Punch-Out! And Star Tropics, two of my most favorite games on Nintendo. And to make it even more special, I had Clockwork Pixel do the animated intro this week, and it looked awesome, dude. And I also brought on the record holder for Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, as well as a fantastic YouTuber, Summoning Salt. So I hope you enjoy it, and with that said, let's get going. So the very first thing that I wanted to talk about is probably one of the most absurd things I've ever seen in a video game, at least a Nintendo game. Over here you see Piston Honda looking at a book. You're not exactly let in on what exactly he's reading, but if we take the camera over onto his side where the pages are open, you can actually see that it's a manga of some sort. And here's where it gets really crazy. So you may notice in some of those panels you can actually make out what the character looks like, and as it turns out these are actual scans of panels used in the Sailor Moon manga. Now the panels themselves are rearranged in a way where it's not identical to the pages in the actual manga, but the panels are.
In the original Punch-Out!, a few pixels of every boxer's skin tone is stored off to the right of the screen. If you remove a layer, it reveals the pixels in their entirety. The developers tried to cover it up with an audience member, but they didn't do a great job of it. You can actually boot up the game on your own right now and see for yourself.
So we actually have developers offering real insight into these games, some of which choose to remain anonymous, but I can verify the source, and one of them wanted to provide an explanation for this scene. So some of this might go over a few of your heads, but a lot of you wanted some real answers as far as what's going on in some of these more mysterious scenes. To explain this one, our anonymous source says, so shaders are used to render out geometry. They can be as simple as for a brick wall, but they can get fancier, like when you go see water or animated particles. Now this shader gets even more fancy. So their goal was to fit a giant crowd in this small room. So to do this, they are constantly getting distance from which the camera is a reference point close to the center of the ring and multiplying it to apply it on a scale of the model via the shader, which makes the characters that are close to the ring close to original size, but the characters that are further away get progressively scaled down, thus looking like a giant crowd. This is way less costly than having different size models and was most likely the best solution. So you might notice that when you take the camera further away, the crowd gets shrunk down. The reason why when you turn the camera left and right the models get all distorted is most likely because the reference point used for the shader doesn't move with the debug camera, thus breaking the illusion.
Unfortunately, Super Punch-Out! Doesn't have a whole lot going on. The opposing boxers get only one layer dedicated to them, and the ring is one whole layer as well. At least Little Mac gets two layers, one for his clear body and another for his gloves.
Okay, so I thought this one was extremely strange, but you know what, there's probably some sense to it. So in all the menus where you've got the A button pulsating, just begging to be pushed, apparently there's always an equal sign underneath it. Personally, I don't think this was left behind for the developers while they were using this on maybe a computer. I think it's probably more likely that it's just a placeholder that the developers later on went back to and placed an A on top of. So seriously, how am I gonna do a Punch-Out! Episode without King Hippo? That would just be the wrong way to do it. But anyways, we got King Hippo here, and he's got a manhole cover covering up his weak spot. But at some point, you can break off the manhole cover and expose his weak spot. But where does the manhole cover go? So, at first it just looks like it disappears, but in truth, it's actually well below the boxing ring, and it's still rigged to the character model, so every time King Hippo moves around, the manhole cover actually mimics the movements. You can actually see something very much like this when you're fighting Soda Popinski, where the soda ball they uses to refill his health is resting below the stage as well.
The original Punch-Out! Uses two layers for every boxer. White pixels like things like eyes, and teeth are almost always on the bottom layer, and things that can be changed later on are on the top layer, ready to be swapped out with stuff like battle damage.
Ah, yeah, but you know what? Great Tiger's a little bit special. See, behind his boxing gloves is one of gaming's best kept secrets on the NES. Great Tiger has a chest. So since we just talked about battle damage just 1 second ago, let's talk about that in Punch-Out! Wii. Now one of the cool things about Punch-Out! Wii is that all the battle damage that are on all the boxers are actually hidden and stored inside their heads. So as you can see here with Soda Popinski, he eventually gets a lump, band-aids, and frayed hairs on his eyebrows, and all of that is stored inside of his noggin, only to grow in size and go into position when Little Mac hits him enough times. And the same can be said for any boxer. But now, here's the part that's a little bit strange to me, and I was trying to figure out why. Some characters get other kinds of objects. In particular, when you rematch Bear Hugger, there's a squirrel that hides underneath his hat. But not only can I not find the squirrel if I look under his hat, but when the squirrel reveals itself in the actual game, you can actually see a frame where it blips into the screen instead of actually showing itself coming from underneath the hat. So I asked my anonymous source what was going on here, because you would just think that they would shrink down the squirrel as well. And the answer we got was, you can hide skeletal meshes however you want in recent game engines. So it makes sense for extras, like the squirrel, not to be rendered and hidden when we don't see them. So why not do the same for band-aids? Most likely because they are part of the same skeletal mesh as the character. And the reason why they would want those to be a part of the character and not separated is because when the band-aids and lumps appear, they have to be perfectly stuck to the model. It's very tricky to get two separate skeletal meshes to synchronize an animation perfectly. The reason why is because animations get compressed and thus create unpredictable tiny offsets. And you might notice this in games that use props like a book or swords. The character will sometimes shake a little bit and won't be perfectly held. That's what's going on there. So, they decided, even if it would cost a bit more to have those bruises and band-aids rendered at all time, the payoff to see all those bruises and everything move the character organically is just too worth it. There's a lot to be said about what happens in between rounds as well. And again, we'll start with Bear Hugger. Normally, you only see a boxer from the waist up, just like in the classic NES game, but there's oftentimes things that are just strange. Like Bear Hugger has his own stool. There's even a chip on the surface of the stool. So this is Bear Hugger's stool. It's strange that the developers went through the trouble because Little Mac doesn't have any stool at all. He sits on nothing. But this same service can be paid out to all the other boxers as well. Von Kaiser uses a stool that he actually uses in one of his cutscenes while he's shining his shoe. And King Hippo has almost like a superhero pose. And you may be saying, no, well, they just did that so he could fit into frame. Incorrect. If they wanted him to fit in the frame, most developers would just shove their character model into the ground. So a lot of these poses that you see off camera are completely intentional. Like also, for example, Piston Honda, who sits on his knees. Now I know that the camera in Punch-Out is very restricted, so stuff like this really means a lot to people who played the game. So here's a side view of Bald Bull doing the bull charge. And here's a satisfying side view of Little Mac getting a 3-star punch on a bull charge.
Surprisingly, Little Mac's eyes actually track the position of the opposing boxer in Punch-Out Wii. Of course, the player would never notice normally, since the camera is never tracked from any other angle other than directly behind Mac.
One, oh yeah, 2, watch me move.
You know what's something that we haven't done yet? A zoom out of at least one of the boxing rings. And it's pretty impressive how much there is to these boxing rings when you consider the fact that the camera keeps it very close-knit to the inside of the ring. In fact, the second boxing ring in the game keeps its spotlights hidden underneath the entire ring, the entire match, when it's not being used in the opening scenes. And also, I want to take a look at the 2D audience members. I don't know about you guys, but these drawings for the audience are a real contender against the Hell Valley Skytrees for the creepiest stuff hidden in the background of a Nintendo game. And here I am acting like everybody knows what the Hell Valley Skytrees are. There's something in the background of Super Mario Galaxy 2 if you didn't know. Alright, now we're going to be talking about Donkey Kong. Lots of people on Twitter were asking me about Donkey Kong for some reason. Whether it be, does Donkey Kong have hands underneath his gloves? Is the Donkey Kong model in the audience different from the Donkey Kong model in the actual fight? Well, let's answer both those questions. So first of all, by checking Donkey Kong's gloves, this is my way of giving an opportunity to say that none of the boxers have hands underneath their gloves. Aaron Ryan does not have horseshoes underneath his gloves. Nobody has anything underneath their gloves. But what's really interesting is that yes, the model used in the audience for Donkey Kong is different from the one that's actually in the fight. In the audience, he does have hands. Ergo, this model is different from the Donkey Kong that's used when you fight. It also doesn't help that the audience member Donkey Kong doesn't have any legs. And also for Donkey Kong's intro, he comes in from a ladder. And I suppose the question is, what does the ladder look like off camera? And when we do get the ladder into full view of the camera, you can see that there is nothing attached to it, but it does have a really funny, awkward animation that you're not allowed to see off screen. So first of all, I have to thank Clockwork Pixel. He did the animated intro this week. He does amazing work with pixels, and I thought Punch-Out's a great franchise to bring on his talent. You might have seen him from Stop Skeletons from Fighting, and if you want, you can follow him on Twitter. I will leave a link in the video description down below. And also, if you've never heard of Summoning Salt before, I highly recommend you go check out his series. If you want to know all the information about who holds what records and when they got those records for certain video games, it's called World Record Progression, and this guy is absolutely passionate about the scene. And for something that would take you a long time to find all the information for, he condenses it into mini documentaries per episode. It's absolutely one of a kind, and he deserves your support. And also, this is a first, so I absolutely want to share it. There's some artwork that was made before the episode came out. This was made by Loogie Dog, and you can find her on Twitter, and I will leave a link to her Twitter page as well. And if you want to support me and you want something in return, I have t-shirts for sale. You can get them in the iconic lavender color or something more typical so you don't stand out in a crowd like black. And lastly, the biggest thank you I have to give is to Ginyo Takeda. Sir, you've put in an immense amount of work to make one of the best childhoods I could have ever had. And whether it be with the software or hardware that you've provided over the years, it's helped to shape my life in incredible ways. So enjoy your retirement, and I wish you the best. But alright guys, that's it! We're out of here! I hope you enjoyed the episode. Feel free to vote on the next one in the iCard in the upper right. But I'll see you later. Bye-bye.